Out of that, I know we talked a little bit about what to do with additional funding at the last, well, if it was last meeting of the year, the meeting before, to try to move up some of the technology whiteboards, because they were scheduled to go into future years in terms of how to bring some of this new technology in and some curriculum materials. So I think I can spend the 150 that we had in there. We also had about $200,000 in special ed savings. And again, this is one of those things that I keep saying, next year we won't have it, so the following year, that's when we're actually going to see the pain of that savings that we, it's good for us that we were able to do that. I believe at least a big part of this has been 3 students that we were planning either on sending off or that came back, and then all of a sudden we have this funding available to us. This is where I was hoping to take the $72,000 for textbooks. We may be able to actually take a little bit more than that. I think Dr. Condon came up with an additional maybe $40,000 or $50,000 in textbooks. And the other thing that we're trying to take advantage of and use this money for now is things that we haven't been able to deal with before. Transportation software, so we can be in control of which way the buses go, making sure they're as full as they can be so we don't get the complaints that the buses are empty. Perhaps even reduce the number of routes that we have put out over the years. The other one is the special ed software that we have doesn't really integrate very well with our SIMS, which is the Student Information Management System. So we would like to update that. We have not had an HR software that allowed us to put out, for example, the postings, and I'll explain how that fits in later on. We used to put all the postings in the newspaper, and we were getting very few actual hits on the postings that we put out there. We tried what's called School Spring, which is an online system, and I got to tell you, from about 10 to 15 to 20, 30, 40 applications for the assistant principal and administrative postings that we put out there. I think for the 2 schools, the elementary and the middle school, we've gotten over 80 applicants. So now our issue is how to manage those, because 80 applications to review is quite a few. And finally, we would like to present the idea of going to what most of the schools have been using for years, which is an automated leave system. Basically, if you're a teacher and you need to take a personal day or a sick day, you simply go in to the computer, you sign yourself in, say, I'm a 3rd grade teacher, I'm going to be out on Thursday. The computer will tell you, yes, you have a time. It'll tell you if it's an appropriate leave that you can take on that particular day. It's not the day before vacation or anything like that. It sends a notice to the principal to approve it. Once the principal approves it, it allows you the opportunity to upload your plans for the day. It then sends a notice to either particular subs that you've identified as your preferred subs, or the subs can go in themselves on the computer, look for openings, and you can pre-plan it. It would save a heck of a lot of legwork and paperwork in the offices, and it will also bridge into our payroll system. So, it's one of those things. It's about time we went there. Basically,
Dr. Colley, while we're on that topic of software, I have a question, because primarily we're going back to the budget. Are we going back to the reports here?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
The
trying to
software,
explain where the money's
I'm totally
coming from.
opposed to making investment in software packages. I would strongly urge investigating SaaS, software as a service, much less in the way of upfront expenses, because when you buy a package of software, you typically, the useful life is somewhat short, and that's why most private industry is going to SaaS, which is,
That's what these are.
so we're not
But you still
buying-
pay for the service.
Right, but it's typically not an upfront package. It's you pay so much a year, and it's a better way to approach the expenditure.
It is that, however, usually there is an installation fee. In other words, they got to take your data, the information that you have, whether it be in paper or in 3 different spreadsheets or databases, and somehow it has to get integrated into the system that they're going to give you. And then every year, you will pay for the service. And it's like,
Well, that's
like
a
the one
hybrid-
we have for the Call One system.
Right, that's a hybrid. Having upfront costs for software licensing is not the way to go. An SAA service, because if it's no longer useful, you don't own this $10,000 software package or a commitment of that kind of money. You use it for the time you need it.
I
And it's
don't.
not sitting on the shelf. And that's my view as a member of this school committee.
Well, let me give you some more information.
Well,
to
I'd look
perhaps-
forward to it, but right now, I think
Well,
we're talking about the budget, not software. That's why I wanted to ask the
Well,
question.
Well,
He's
it has a
explaining
cost.
where the-
It has a
where the
cost
monies are
attached to
going.
it. So it does go,
No, I know, but we're looking
both
at
ways.
an expenditure report from a prior year.
no, for this year. I'm talking about this year's budget. I'm not talking next year or the previous year. I'm saying
From 2000.
that we can use this year's budget because we have savings in special ed.
But
we
what
have
I understand, this year being this year's budget. But are we
2000.
going over the report, which is the expenditure report now?
Yes, and I'm telling you, at the end of those expenditure reports, you're going to see numbers that say we have monies
I
available.
understand that, but I have some questions on the expenditure report. Is that still on the
Yes,
agenda?
it's still, this is the FY
If
'11
you-
budget review.
if you
that
let
we're
me
doing
get there,
now.
we
Yes.
can get there.
Yes.
I'd look
You'll still
forward
be able
to
to ask those questions.
reports on options for further expenditures that aren't on,
That-
that to deal with that new cash, but to not have anything in front of
That'd be
us
great.
to look at, such as the package or the service we're looking at, I have difficulty getting my hands around it without a report or presentation of options to look at.
Well, let me tell you what we have done, because that's part of
I'm
our
asking
job.
to see that in writing as part of the package that we prepare for when we come into these meetings. I've heard about scheduling and payroll and putting ads in the paper. That's great, but I think we have to start with, we have X dollars, this is where we want to spend it. And I think that's our role, to be involved in the progress, not the intricacies of a software package and how it's going to place an ad in the paper for a job opening. I think we want to keep focused on the expenditure report and the questions I have on the expenditure report, not the money we have after we're done expended.
Okay, unfortunately, I didn't know that you would expect that from us.
I
'cause you're
like
asking-
written reports in the package before they come. That's not news. But I do have some questions on the expenditure report.
What are your questions?
My question is on the revolving accounts. That's why I was asking if
okay.
we're through that, or are we getting up to it?
Go ahead, what are your questions?
Are we through that? My first question is, are we through this, or are we
I wasn't
going
done,
through
but-
each, are we going through each package?
I was going to get there.
Well, I would prefer we not review the expenditure of the surplus, finish the analysis of the expenditure report, answer questions on that.
Okay. So let me finish that. So we have 150 in salaries, of which I had already come to you and asked for technology, curriculum materials. We have about $200,000 in savings of special ed, of which you already approved the $72,000. And then We're not quite sure yet, because again, you still have a month worth of expenditures to go, but we could see anywhere between $100,000 and $150,000 more in expenses. For example, right now, the middle school, elementary, high school, Macomber put together, they have encumbrances of about $80,000 that we don't know if they're going to be actually used up by the end of June 30th. We do have course reimbursements that we had expected people would take courses this year. We only had to pay 20. We actually didn't see a huge increase in the utilities. There's another 20. So all put together, we have about basically about $500,000 in savings. That
Is that including the 80,000 that we're still questioning?
80,000.
You just said there's still some down at the middle school that you don't know.
No, that's part of it.
That is, so that
I'm
is
just
including
giving you
that.
the big numbers.
Potentially.
So if you look at the expenditures that are in your packets, you'll come out, if you go through all of them, that's about how much I can pull out of this budget. Now, if you have questions about
Okay, so
specific accounts.
with my questions is, I don't know if you need a motion, but I believe it would be appropriate for us to have a scheduled workshop on budget 2011, and I would look forward to a report of what the figures are going to be as we're going forward here. There's still the approximation of 500,000. I think we look at a question of our long list of needs may be able to be met with some of that, and I don't think tonight we're prepared to address that.
If you're not prepared, I thought I was. But that's just my opinion.
No, I'd like to see, in writing before the meeting to be able to come equipped with questions.
Well, you have to understand, when you get to the end of the year, every day there's changes, and I've been trying to work with my staff to come up with a possible list of things. We have some of those. If you want them, I can give you some copies, for example, of some of the technology things that we could...
I would appreciate that for the budget workshop I'm suggesting, and I'll pass this over to Dr. Colley. It's a catalog for projectors, and I'm sure you probably have plenty of catalogs, but
Yep.
I like to recycle. So I picked that up at one of the meetings I attended. So I would propose fitting in another meeting next week so that we can take this conversation further, where we have a continual agenda items here that we'd like to keep on track with. And I don't know if there's any days that anyone's available.
Does anybody else have any comments on what we're looking at here? My only,
Yes, I had another, if
My-
I still have the floor, I didn't pass the floor.
let me just make one comment, and then I'll go back to you. My only comment on the budgeting and the spending and whatnot is, while we do set the budget, it isn't the school committee's job to necessarily micromanage how the money is being spent. And I just want to be careful that we aren't crossing the line on the smaller things,